Hello people, welcome to lecture 3 on grammar. In this lecture we will be seeing some more problems on construction of context-free grammar. I have the first question for the day. Write context-free grammar for set of all strings on a comma b with at least two a's. In the previous lecture we had discussed the restriction imposed upon the position of the a's, but in this question we have restriction upon the number of a's. So let's first analyze the question and list down our first restriction, that is the number of a's. So the first restriction is number of a's, and the word at least implies that it can have minimum 2 or more than 2 a's in the string accepted by this grammar. So this was the first restriction of this grammar. Now the second thing that should click in your mind is that do you have any restriction on the position of a's? Obviously not, it's not given in the question. So a's can be anywhere, like at the start or at the end, at the middle. So there can be n number of possibilities, but according to me and as I perceive, there are 5 possibilities in which the a's can be placed in the string, and the 5 possibilities are: it can either be at the start or at the end or at the middle. Now after these 3 possibilities, there are 2 more possibilities that these 2 a's can either be together or can be placed differently in the string. Now let's take one example so you will get to know the strings better. Now if the at the start means the a will be at the start, the string will start with the terminal a. At the end meaning this terminal a will be at the end. In the middle, the 2 a's will be together at the middle, and both a's together means the a's will be together, and both a's differently means that the both a's will be differently. But all these 5 restrictions impose one simple rule, that they must have at least 2 a's, and the position of a's can be any of these. So we have to construct a grammar now which will satisfy all of these 6 restrictions. Only then a grammar will be correct. So let's have the grammar. Okay, so this is s tends to capital X, the terminal a, capital X, the terminal a, the capital X. Now these 3 terminals represent any combinations of a's and b's, and it's at the first restriction that this rule satisfies is that there are 2 terminals a which can be placed anywhere. So the number of a's, that means the minimum 2 number of counts of the terminals, is satisfied by this rule. And if you want more number of a's, you can simply replace this capital X by ax or bx. If you have ax, then you can have any number of a's, and if you replace by bx, you can get any string that is acceptable by this grammar. So this condition is checked. Now let us get to the position of a's. So at the start, if you want a string that should be derivable from this grammar, then you can simply replace this x by epsilon. Thus the string will start with the terminal a. If you want at the end, you can replace this capital X by an epsilon, and if you want the double a in the middle, you can simply replace this x by epsilon. So these 3 conditions are checked by replacing the capital X with all the combinations here. Now the both a's together and both a's differently can also be derivable by keeping this capital X as epsilon, or if you want it as differently, you can replace this capital X by bx and this x then epsilon. So all of these possibilities are checked, hence we conclude that this grammar is perfectly correct. The second question for the day: write context free grammar for set of all strings on a comma b with exactly 2 a's. So the step 1 is analysis part. So after seeing the exactly 2 a's, we will conclude that the restriction is on the number of a's. So let's have a first restriction, that is number of a's is exactly 2 a's, means neither less than 2 nor more than 2, exactly 2. All strings having exactly 2 a's will only be accepted by this grammar. Now the second question is that the position of a's. So it must click in your mind that if it is not given, we have to think in 5 possible directions. As I said, the 5 p's. Here comes the 5 possibilities: at the start, at the end, middle, both A's together, and both A's differently. The strings are given here for your references, so you can just understand the meaning of the restriction from it. Okay, in the previous question I had given you the list of restrictions and given you the grammar, and then we had verified each restriction. Now in this question we will try to derive the grammar from these restrictions. We will try to guess it and then we'll verify. Okay, so the number of A's, so we have to first satisfy the number of A's restriction. So what we can do is that we can have two terminals already present in the string or in the rule, so the two number of A's will be satisfied. Now the position of A's, so for at the start we'll keep a capital X A, then for at the end we'll keep a X at the end, and for middle we'll keep a capital X. So the overall rule would be S tends to capital X A, capital X A, capital X. Now both A's together and both A's differently would be satisfied by keeping the capital X tending to epsilon. So that will suffice that we have both A's together and differently condition also. Now one thing to be noted here is that here the term exactly is given. So if we frame the X tends to any combinations of A's and B's, then it might be that the X is replaced by A's and B's. This would be more clearer when we see the grammar. Okay, so this is the grammar as we had guessed, and this is perfectly correct. And the thing I was speaking is that this capital X is here not any combinations of A's and B's, but any combination of B's, because if we keep any combinations of A's and B's, then this X could be replaced by any of the A's, then it would violate this condition of exactly two A's. That means that it might have more than two A's, so it is necessary that there should be no A here and only BX here. Might just imagine that if the previous question was there of at least two A's, then it's mandatory to keep this A, because at least the term itself means two or more than two A's. So here if it is given exactly, we conclude that there should be no AX here and only BX here, only then this condition will be sufficed. If you check all of these conditions, they are all satisfied by this grammar, and we say that this grammar is perfectly correct. Okay, so let's have the last question of the day. Write context-free grammar for set of all strings on A comma B with at most two A's. Now this word at most is crazy. It is very important to understand this word, so I would like to give you an example. Supposing your dad gives you a debit card and he tells you to use at most 1000 rupees from it. So that means you could use either 500 rupees or 10 rupees or 20 rupees or 1000 rupees, but not more than that. It could be also possible that you don't use at all, so you could at most use 1000 rupees. So in this question you can have at most two A's. That means you can have either 0 A's or 1 A, or more at most 2 A's. So the first restriction here would be at most number of A's, at most 2 A's, that is 2 A's or 1 A's or 0 A's. Remember guys, at most 2 A's means not more than 2 A's. There cannot be more than 2 A's in this grammar. It could have no A's, then also it could be acceptable, but if there is more than 2 A's, this grammar would not accept that string. Okay, so the position of A's is again not mentioned, so we'll think in 5 P's, that is the 5 possibilities at the start, at the end, middle, together and differently. So we have to construct a grammar now that will suffice or will satisfy all of these 6 restrictions. So the grammar is as follows. The first rule is that S tends to capital X A, capital X A, capital X. Now this means that there could be exactly 2 A's and the grammar would accept all strings having exactly 2 A's. Now remember, this capital X cannot be replaced by any of the AX, because it is exactly 2 A's as we have seen in the previous question. So this X is not any combinations of A's and B's, but is actually any combinations of B's. Okay, now we'll have this condition satisfies the 2 A's rule. Now we have to make a rule which will also accept the strings having 1 A's. So this is the rule for it. S tends to capital X, A, capital X. Now all strings that have only a single terminal will be accepted by this rule. So the 1A and the 2A restriction is checked. Now what about the 0A? So we'll already have S tends to X, that is no A, so it will have directly any combinations of B or even epsilon. So the whole condition, the whole restriction and the condition as a whole is checked. Now we'll see the 5 possibilities which we have already incorporated here. We'll just verify it at the start, at the end and the middle. For these 3 restrictions we have already placed capital X and capital X here, and if it is a single terminal, there needs to be start and at the end. And in this rule, as it's just a restriction as there is no restriction on A's because there are no A's present in this string, it will be just a combination of B's, whereas there is no restriction on combinations of B's. Now the X will be any combinations of B's as we have discussed in the previous discussion. So Bx and epsilon, and this stands for any combinations of B's. So these all restrictions are satisfied by this grammar, and hence we say that this grammar is correct. Let's summarize all of the 3 examples that we have seen before. So here we start with at most. The word at most itself means 2 A's, 1 A's and 0 A's. So the grammar for it was as simple as this. The rule for 2 A's, the rule for 1 A's and the rule for no A's. And the thing to be noted here is that the capital X is not combinations of A's and B's, but it is actually the combinations of B's only. Then we came to the example of exactly 2 A's. That means neither less, neither more, exactly 2 A's. So the grammar for that was also similar to at most 2 A's. The only difference was that the capital X is the combinations of B's only. Then the first example that we discussed was at least 2 A's. The word at least means either minimum 2 A's or it can be more than 2 A's. So the grammar for it was as simple as that, and the capital X would be replaced by any combinations of A's and B's that would satisfy the condition of at least 2 A's. Note guys, here we had discussed the examples with 2 A's and even here with 2 A's and 2 A's, but in exam or anywhere in the real life situations that this could be replaced by any constant number. It could be 5 A's, 4 A's, but the logic remains the same. The only difference would be in the number of terminals. If it was 3 A's, it would be capital X, A, capital X, A, capital X, A, capital X, and this would remain the constant. Guys, in automata theory, the logic is important and not the question. So understand the logic, then you will be able to solve any of the similar type of questions. I hope you have understood the lecture. Thank you for attending lecture number 3. See you all in the lecture number 4.